On May 8, 1902, the baker in Saint-Pierre kneaded dough, his knuckles white, completely unaware that his city was already dead. Above him, Mount Pelée rumbled, raining fine ash. Birds were silent, the sky a bruised yellow-gray. Beneath the city, the earth vibrated with a constant, low tremor. 30,000 people were preparing for a holiday. Mount Pelée had screamed its intentions for weeks. Boiling rivers, venomous snakes, a factory swallowed by mud. Yet no one fled. Why did 30,000 people remain? And what dangerous truth does this story still hide about the way you trust authority? To understand the choice they made, you first need to understand the place they refused to leave. Saint-Pierre, on the French island of Martinique, was not some provincial backwater. It was called the Paris of the West Indies, a jewel of colonial commerce and culture, a city of theaters, cafes, and electric streetlights, more advanced than many cities in mainland France. Its deep harbor was a hub for the rum and sugar trade, the lifeblood of the island's economy, generating immense wealth for the French elite who ran it. The city itself sat nestled in a breathtaking bay, right at the foot of the magnificent green-sloped Mount Pelée. For generations, the volcano was seen as a protector, a landmark, a source of fertile soil, not a threat. It had last grumbled in 1851, a minor steam event, and had been considered dormant ever since. You have to picture it not as the ruin you see in photographs, but as a living, vibrant metropolis, a place that felt permanent, solid, and safe. Its citizens were sophisticated, educated, and deeply invested in the French political system. In the spring of 1902, that system was all-consuming, because a fiercely contested election was scheduled for May 11th. The city's political life was a battleground between the island's conservative white elite and the progressive mixed-race party led by a man named Amédée Knight. The fate of the election and control of the island's future would be decided by the voters of Saint-Pierre. Every single vote mattered. This election, this very human contest for power, was happening in the shadow of a geological event that did not care about politics at all. It was a collision of human ambition and geological time, and the people of Saint-Pierre were standing at ground zero. But what they didn't know was that the real danger wasn't in the rumbling mountain, but in the choices being made in the city's highest offices. And this is where the story stops making sense. The warnings did not begin with a whisper. They began with a plume of smoke in late April. At first, it was a novelty, something to be observed from the cafes along the shoreline, but then the ash began to fall, a constant, gritty rain that coated everything in a gray film. By April 25th, the tremors started, gentle at first, then growing in violence until they rattled windows in their frames and sent people staggering in the streets. If you had been there, you would have felt the deep, gut-level wrongness of the solid earth moving beneath your feet. On April 30th, the Rivière Blanche, a river flowing from the volcano's summit, suddenly flooded with boiling water and gray mud, the water temperature scalding, the smell of sulfur becoming a permanent part of the air. Then came the insects and the animals. On May 2nd, a horrifying exodus began from the slopes of Pelée. Thousands of fer-de-lance snakes, among the most venomous in the world, slithered down into the city, seeking refuge from the vibrating, superheating ground. They were joined by swarms of giant centipedes and scorpions. The city became a nightmare landscape. Horses, dogs, pigs, and poultry were bitten and died in the streets. An estimated 50 people, mostly children, succumbed to the venom. This was not a subtle warning. This was a biblical plague. What nobody realized yet, not even the people involved, was that this had already been decided. On May 5th, the mountain escalated its assault. A lahar, a volcanic mudflow of immense power, broke from the side of the crater. A wall of boiling mud, rock, and trees, 100 feet high, roared down the Rivière Blanche at 60 miles per hour. It slammed into the Guerin sugar factory on the coast, burying the entire facility and its 25 workers in an instant. The impact generated 3 successive tsunamis that smashed into the harbor, capsizing boats and flooding the low-lying parts of the city. The official response to this escalating horror was not alarm, but reassurance. Governor Louis Moutet, the highest authority on the island, arrived in Saint-Pierre not to order an evacuation, but to quell the rising panic. He brought his wife with him, a calculated gesture of confidence. He established a scientific commission to study the volcano, a committee of local high school teachers who dutifully reported back that there was no immediate danger to the city. The local newspaper, Le Colonial, run by the governor's political allies, published editorials mocking the fearmongers and assuring the public that the city was perfectly safe. It called the ashfall a mere inconvenience. To understand what was happening, you must understand that information was being weaponized. While the earth was screaming, the human institutions were telling everyone to cover their ears. But there's a detail buried in the record that nobody flagged at the time. Refugees from the countryside, their homes destroyed or threatened, fled into Saint-Pierre, believing the city was the only safe place left. They were encouraged to do so. The city's population swelled from 26,000 to nearly 30,000, a tragic irony that concentrated the victims in one place. On May 7th, just one day before the final eruption, news arrived that the Saint-Pierre volcano on the neighboring island of St. Vincent had erupted violently, killing over 1,500 people. This was a direct, terrifying parallel. But the news was suppressed. The telegraph lines were busy with election business. The authorities told the people what they wanted to hear, that their mountain was different, that their city was safe, that the worst was over. And the people, caught between the evidence of their senses and the confident pronouncements of their leaders, chose to believe the leaders. The worst part hadn't happened yet, and the reason nobody stopped it is stranger than anything that came before. Here's where it gets worse. The ultimate betrayal was not loud. It was delivered calmly, on a piece of paper with the full weight of official authority. On May 7th, Governor Moutet's hand-picked scientific commission published its official findings. Imagine you are a father of 3, living in a house where you must sweep ash from your doorstep every morning. A house where your wife keeps the children inside for fear of snakes. For weeks you have felt the ground shake. You have smelled the poison in the air. Your own instincts are screaming at you to take your family and run, but you are a citizen. You believe in order, in experts, in the government's duty to protect you. So you wait for the official word, and then it comes, printed in the newspaper for all to see. The commission, led by a high school science teacher, declares that Mount Pelée presents no more danger to the inhabitants of Saint-Pierre than Vesuvius does to those of Naples. It is a statement of such staggering, lethal incompetence that it defies belief. It compares a volcano actively erupting with one that is dormant. This wasn't about a scientific miscalculation. It was a scientific lie. A political sedative designed to keep the population calm and in place for the upcoming Sunday election. Think about the person you trust most to tell you the truth in a crisis. A doctor, a scientist, a leader. Now imagine them looking you in the eye and telling you the fire you see on the horizon is just a sunset. This was that moment for an entire city. The official trusted voices chose a political objective over 30,000 human lives. They looked at a city in peril and told it to go back to sleep. And in that moment, the fate of Saint-Pierre was sealed, not by the volcano, but by a simple, deliberate lie. What they found when they finally opened the door changed everything, and not in the way anyone expected. But there's a detail buried in the record that nobody flagged at the time. This was not just a series of miscalculations or a single tragic error in judgment. When you look at the sequence of events, a more chilling pattern emerges. This was a coordinated, systematic suppression of reality. The reassurances from Governor Moutet were not just hopeful words, they were a strategy. The newspaper Le Colonial didn't just downplay the danger. It actively ridiculed those who were afraid, creating social pressure to stay. It accused those wanting to flee of being unpatriotic and cowardly. Eyewitness accounts from the time report that militia were stationed on the roads leading out of Saint-Pierre, turning people back, telling them the danger was in the countryside, not the city. The goal was simple and ruthless: keep the voters in place for the May 11th election. The progressive candidate, Amédée Knight, drew his support from the rural areas and the working class of Saint-Pierre. An evacuation would have dispersed his voter base, handing the election to the conservative establishment, which the governor and the business elite supported. And here's what should make you deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't unusual. The decision to sacrifice public safety for political or economic continuity is a pattern you see repeated throughout history, and you see it today. The news of the St. Vincent eruption, which should have triggered an immediate, panicked evacuation of Saint-Pierre, was deliberately buried. The telegraph office prioritized political messages over geological warnings. The system was working exactly as it was designed to protect the interests of those in power. What the people in the city didn't know was that they were no longer citizens to be protected. They were political assets to be managed. They were pawns in a game, and the board they were standing on was about to be incinerated. But none of that prepared anyone for the final chilling entry they found in the ship's log of the Orsolina, a vessel that managed to escape the harbor just before the end. The final entry in the Orsolina's log, written by its captain as he defied port authorities and fled the harbor on the evening of May 7th, delivered the truth that history tried to forget. He wrote that Mount Pelée was a torch in the sky, and that he refused the governor's direct order to stay, believing the city was doomed. This wasn't about a scientific miscalculation. This was about a direct, conscious refusal to see the truth because the truth was politically inconvenient. The entire catastrophe was anchored to the date of May 11th. Governor Moutet and the ruling party needed the voters of Saint-Pierre to remain in the city for 4 more days. What you now understand, and what most people never will, is that this wasn't about a volcano at all. It was about a handful of men so terrified of losing an election that they were willing to gamble with 30,000 lives as their stake. They knew the risk. They saw the ash. They felt the tremors. They heard the reports from the countryside. But the risk of losing political control was, in their minds, greater than the risk of a cataclysm. This is the ultimate darkness of the Saint-Pierre story. It is not the story of a natural disaster. It is the story of a man-made one, where the volcano was merely the weapon. The trigger was pulled by politics, by greed, and by the terrifyingly common human belief that the systems we build are more important than the people they are meant to serve. And the part nobody could explain came next. At 7:50 a.m. on Thursday, May 8th, Ascension Day, the church bells of Saint-Pierre began to ring, calling the faithful to Mass. People dressed in their finest clothes walked through the ash-covered streets. For a few minutes, it was a scene of defiant normalcy. At 8:02 a.m., the side of Mount Pelée tore open. A dense black cloud of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic rock, glowing from within at over 1,000 degrees Celsius, erupted horizontally. It was not a lava flow. It was a pyroclastic hurricane. Moving at over 300 miles per hour, it hugged the ground and descended upon Saint-Pierre. It took less than 2 minutes to cross the 4 miles to the city. The end was not a struggle. It was an erasure. The heat was so intense it carbonized bodies instantly, boiled the water in the harbor, and caused the city's vast stores of rum to explode, sending rivers of flaming liquor through the streets. Stone buildings were pulverized. 30,000 people were incinerated where they stood. They died in their homes, in their churches, in the streets. Governor Moutet and his wife died in their residence, consumed by the inferno they had refused to flee. The election they had sacrificed everything for would never happen. The answer to the question you've been sitting with this entire video is this. The 30,000 people of Saint-Pierre did not stay because they were ignorant or foolish or brave. They stayed because they were obedient. They stayed because they were told to by every instrument of authority in their lives, their government, their newspapers, their officially sanctioned scientists. They were the victims of a system that, in a moment of crisis, prioritized its own continuation over their survival. The real horror of Saint-Pierre is not the awesome, indiscriminate power of the earth. It is the specific, calculated power of human beings lying to other human beings for their own gain. They were told the danger was a manageable inconvenience, and they believed it. They were told that fleeing was an act of cowardice, and they believed it. They were told that the authorities had the situation under control, and they believed it, right up until the moment a 1,000-degree cloud of gas turned them to ash. There were only a handful of survivors on the edge of the city. The most famous was a man named Ludger Silbaris, a prisoner who was saved by the thick stone walls of his underground, windowless jail cell. The man society had deemed worthless was the one who lived, protected by the very walls that were meant to punish him. The city's respectable, obedient citizens were all gone. When the first rescue ships arrived, they found a smoking, silent ruin, covered in a thick blanket of gray ash, indistinguishable from the ash that had coated the baker's hands on that final morning. The air still smelled of sulfur. The pattern that destroyed Saint-Pierre did not die with it. Every time you are told to remain calm in the face of an obvious crisis, every time an official reassures you that the economy is more important than the environment, that profits are more important than safety, you are hearing the ghost of Governor Moutet. The next time every official source is telling you one thing, but the evidence of your own eyes and your own instincts is telling you another, remember the people of Saint-Pierre. They trusted the system, and the system led them calmly and confidently to their own cremation. Tell me in the comments, which part of this stayed with you?